Hello and welcome to See You in Court, a podcast that informs you about the Georgia civil justice system, what it means to you, and how it protects individual rights. During each episode, we dive deep into stories, cases, and insights that matter to Georgians. You can learn more on our website at www.seeyouincourtpodcast.org. Join the conversation on our YouTube channel at See You in Court Podcast, and stay connected with us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/See You in Court Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by the Georgia Civil Justice Foundation. Your hosts are Robin Fraser Clark and Lester Tate, who are both past presidents of the State Bar of Georgia and who both serve on the board of directors of the Georgia Civil Justice Foundation. And now this episode of See You in Court.
Good morning, friends and lovers of the law. Welcome to See You in Court. I'm Lester Tate, and here with me today is my co-host, the charming, beautiful, smart Robin Fraser Clark. How are you, Robin?
Wow, I'm doing great after that introduction. I'm going to have you introduce me more often if you say stuff like that.
I would love to. Robin is well known to our listeners and even lawyers all over the state who aren't listeners. But I'm going to give our biography of her this morning because she and one of her clients who she had a remarkable result for are going to be our guest. Robin is a trial lawyer. She was the 50th president of the State Bar of Georgia. She's a past president of Georgia Trial Lawyers and past president of the Lawyers Club of Atlanta, and has practiced law here in Georgia for over 36 years. She's a member of the International Society of Barristers, American Board of Trial Advocates, and is a fellow in the American College of Trial Lawyers. She's tried over 75 jury trials and argued in the Georgia appellate courts over 45 times. Robin, welcome to your own show here.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Great to see you again and catch up with you. And we have a very interesting program that we're going to talk about that I actually taped several years ago, but we're going to play it for our listeners today.
Well, I want to ask you some questions about your client, Peter Heidgerd, here. And I want to start out, though, by pointing out that this was a case you took pro bono, really because, you tell me, but I think because you thought the interest of justice might demand it.
Oh, for sure. And the fact that I knew it was a long shot. It would take forever if it ever happened. And there was just no sense in charging my client for my time because that would be just unnecessary. But yeah, I took it pro bono because of my interest in the subject matter. So this was my client came to me and with a story from 1989, if you can believe that, where he was a United States Army officer and had been convicted by the United States Army for being gay, and came to me to see if I could get him a presidential pardon, which I don't know how often you have a client coming in asking you to do that, but it's not only rare, but it makes you kind of fall out of your chair. Like, I don't know if I can pull that one off.
I've filed for one and I didn't get it, so I know the hurdles. I don't know what ABC Sports would call the thrill of victory. I do know the agony of defeat. Defeat on that. So tell us how did you come across this case? Did he walk into your office one day, or what?
A mutual friend, one of his neighbors, who is a mutual friend, called me and said, "Hey, I have this friend. He was convicted of being gay when he was in the Army a long time ago. Who does those cases?" And my response was, no one does those cases. You hear about them in the, I guess, upper political echelons, and then it's usually who knows the president. You have to know the president. Of course, I didn't know President Obama. But I told this mutual friend, I don't know anybody who does that, but let me talk to him because the subject matter is near and dear to my heart. I've been an advocate for gay rights for 40 years or so now. And it just upset me so much that a United States Army officer would be tried and convicted by our government for being gay. Just irritated the you-know-what out of me. And so I said, let me meet with him. I'd like to give it a try because this shouldn't have happened. And we began a 6-year journey.
So I think I should point out that, a lot of times we talk about egregious civil rights situations that happened before we were born, or, maybe when we were children. But 1989, you and I would have been just a couple of years into the practice of law. We were actually baby lawyers at that time. So this is by no means ancient history, is it?
No, not in my book and not in your book. But if you go back to 1989 and the state of our armed forces, it was even before Don't Ask, Don't Tell. It was a crime to be in the armed services and be gay. There were no gays allowed. Now, folks were gay and served, but if they said something or were caught in a relationship, they would have been prosecuted and convicted, as my client was. And then we moved forward over the years to Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which really came out of the Clinton administration. If you remember that, is like, okay, we'll let you be gay and serve in the Army. Just don't tell anybody you're gay. We won't ask you and you don't tell us. And I think a lot of gay advocates saw that as a missed opportunity by President Clinton, that he should have just taken the steps to eliminate the law against being gay in the armed services at that moment, but he didn't. And then it got all the way to President Obama, who finally did away with even Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and said, we're not going to make this as crime. This is ridiculous.
So I have a book about advocacy by a lawyer from the 1800s, and he talks about how meeting with the client is an exciting thing, and how you need to get their story and let them tell their story, and then ask them questions and spend time with them. And I know that that's one of the things you as a great advocate do. So tell me about him coming in.
Yeah.
It's what doctors would say. How did they present that day? How did he present? What was your impression?
My impression was just the nicest man you'd ever care to meet, working with landscaping group, mainly because it's the only folks who would hire him. If you think about this, having a felony conviction, dishonorable discharge from the Army on your record, it's very hard to get a job, which was one reason he was seeking a presidential pardon. You can't get a job. You can't get a mortgage for your home. You can't even get a car loan. So it was really tough on him to live like that. But he's as great of a guy as you'll ever meet, just loving to death. And he came and told me his story. I'm like, Peter, look, I've never done this before. I don't know exactly what to do, but we'll figure it out together and do it. And we began a petition for presidential pardon. And then over the years, it involved dealing with the pardon attorney. The U.S. Department of Justice has a pardon attorney who you deal with. They have FBI investigators who will come and interview your client. These investigators go and interview the client's neighbors, his employer. They do a thorough background check. Your client at this point has to be squeaky clean, and they investigate like you would expect the FBI to investigate, or the U.S. Department of Justice to investigate anything to the nth degree. And so we went through all that. And then it's a matter of hoping, waiting, praying, fingers crossed, and waiting it out.
So since as we've discussed, you hadn't really done one of these before, you couldn't pull out the go-by notebook to figure out what to write or plead or whatever else. How did you figure all of that out?
A lot of legal research, seeing what I could find in the statutes and just following the statutes to the T. That's one thing. I was talking to a younger lawyer the other day. you may not have done a particular type of case before, but we know how to pull a statute and read it and figure it out and know the steps to do. And that's really what I did.
So it took 6 years.
Yeah.
And let's start with year one. What did you do, and what, if anything, how far down the road did you get the train during the first year?
Probably as pretty far as they would let us. File a petition. You file affidavits from people who know your client, who will vouch for his character. So we filed a lot of affidavits, gathered those up, filed the petition, met with the FBI. They came to my office, which is an interesting thing too, to have these pretty straight and narrow guys come in and start talking with you and your client.
I've had the FBI come to my office before for background interviews on people who wanted to be judges and whatnot, so.
Yeah. It's like that. And then, we do as much as we can. We knew the investigation was going because people would call us and say, hey, they came and interviewed me or whatever. And we knew it was going on. And really in the first year, we probably did about as much as we possibly could. I think there were some more interviews with the FBI and Department of Justice in the second year. And then you've done all you can. And then I began really a campaign through social media, through letters, writing the president on a regular basis. I just figured I would irritate the Department of Justice with as many letters as possible, social media postings. And so I just did a lot of that advocacy. And then when in Obama's second term, he appointed, I don't know if you remember, but he appointed Eric Fanning as the first openly gay Secretary of the Army. And I thought, okay, here it is. How can the Secretary of the Army be openly gay and yet allow this horrible offense to continue with my client, convicting him of being gay? And so I started reaching out to Secretary of the Army, Fanning, and really wrote him a lot of letters, social postings. And I did everything I could think of to put my client in front of them to say, don't let this egregious problem still exist.
So was the entire period of your advocacy during the Obama administration, or did you have to wait for a change of administrations?
I think it was all during Obama. But Obama took his time on fixing this issue. He didn't immediately address it. It took a while to eliminate Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Let's see, that was I think in 2011 maybe. But it took a while for him to address it. So it wasn't just like I filed a petition and okay, yeah, we'll grant it. It took unbelievable amount of advocacy, letters, social media posting, anybody I could think to reach out to who would help me, I did.
So couple of questions about that. I don't think I'm going out on a limb and saying that the Justice Department probably has more employees committed to making people convicted felons than to eradicating past convictions. And so you talked about sort of what you did to try to get the attention of the powers that be. Were you able to enlist any heavy hitters in this, or people to help you with more political clout than a couple of podcasting lawyers might have?
Yeah. No, I thought about that, but I had no offers of help and no one that I had any relationship with to do anything about it. We thought about contacting our U.S. Senator and representatives, but at the time, you may remember, our senators and representatives would have been against us on this. They were not in favor of, they were not supportive of the idea of a pardon for being gay in the Army. So it was not going to be helpful. So we went it alone. Peter and I just did this on our own.
So on the one hand, I'm sure Peter was happy to have you advocating for him and pushing, every channel you can. On the other hand, there had to be sort of a maybe embarrassment too with people that maybe didn't know he had a felony conviction. You're putting it out there in the public domain.
That's right. I totally agree. And he had to tell his friends and neighbors, hey, you may be contacted by the FBI. Here's what's going on. But this was so long ago that, yeah, he wasn't openly talking about the fact that he had a felony conviction. Who would want to talk about that? So, yeah, bringing it back probably was traumatic for him. He knew he had to do it if he had any chance to get a pardon. He really, really needed the pardon to be able to get a better job, have a house for the first time in his life. Things that we as adults in America probably take for granted, but he couldn't take for granted. He needed that help. So hats off to Peter for having the courage to do this. It really was a courageous act for him to say, yeah, I want to go forward.
So you first year sounds like it was pretty active, maybe going into the second year less active. And as most clients, want to call pretty regularly and say, hey, what's going on with my case?
Yeah.
Were you able to sort of give him updates, or, it seems like this could be sort of that black box where you put everything in it and you hope at some point it comes out the other side, but
Yeah.
it's not like a filing with a court.
Right. Yeah, we had regular conversations. He wanted updates and I wanted updates, and we didn't have updates. It's not like the Department of Justice or Pardon Council call you on a regular basis, say, hey, just want to keep you up to date on what's going on. They don't do that. It's basically radio silence. And so for several years, we heard zero from Pardon Council or from the U.S. Department of Justice about this, just absolutely nothing. And so as each day went on, we had less and less hope. We thought, okay, it's just not going to happen. And then when at the end of President Obama's second term, you'll recall what happened in that election. I had an honest conversation with Peter saying, look, if it doesn't happen with President Obama, I don't think we have a chance. With this next president, I don't think it's going to happen. So keep saying your prayers. We did that. And then, a lot of times pardons are issued around Christmas. Christmas comes and goes in 2016, and we go past Christmas, and I call Peter. I said, look, I thought if we heard anything, would have to be Christmas by Christmas 2016. We haven't heard anything. I'm sorry. I just don't think it's going to happen. And then January 17, while Obama is still in office, may have been one of his last days in office. Right.
I think January the 20th is the swearing in.
Okay. So
the constitutionally named swearing in day.
So 3 days before the turnover of the office, I get a call, and I'll never forget it, but I get a call from a lawyer who says, hey, I'm so-and-so, and I'm with the Department of Pardons in the United States Department of Justice. I'm like, Department of Pardons? He goes, yeah, I'm Pardon Counsel. I'm like, okay. I only had one pardon case going on. I said, okay. And he goes, well, I'm calling you to inform you that the President of the United States is going to grant your client's pardon. And, it's an unbelievable moment. I broke into tears. I could barely speak. And he goes through a litany of things like, this is going to be in a press release. You can't talk about it before we issue our official press release, He said, you can tell your client and you can tell your immediate family, but no one else. And you can't say anything public about it or online, but you'll be receiving a pardon. And we did receive a beautiful pardon signed by President Obama. So I immediately called Peter, and Peter was working. He was at his landscape headquarters, and he put it on speaker because his coworkers are there and they'd known about it. He put it on speaker, and I told him, you have been granted a presidential pardon. and you just hear everybody screaming and so happy for him. And it's just such a moment of unbelievable elation. You just cannot fathom the joy that moment was. And then I told Peter, I'm going to tell my family, my immediate family. And the next person I called was my daughter, Alex, who was in college at the time and had actually interned for me here at my office. She goes on after college and goes to law school. She's now a lawyer. But she was an advocate for gay rights her entire life. And I put this in my letters to the president, when I told my two kids, same age as your kids, that the United States government had used all of its resources to convict a United States officer for being gay, I mean, they thought I was crazy. They thought I was making that up. Like, how could that happen? I'm like, it happened. And they just could not believe our government would do that. So first person I called was Alex to tell her, and she started crying. And she's just so proud and happy. And then I called the rest of my family, Chaz, my son, and my husband, Bill. It was just a joyous moment for Peter, for me, and just it rectified an egregious wrong. And we were just so happy.
So it rectified that wrong on paper. Convicted felon, no longer a convicted felon.
Right.
Since he's received the pardon, has it helped with some of the practical things that were plaguing him throughout this? Well, I started to say 6-year quest, but he's been struggling with it
28 years.
Longer than that. Yeah.
Yeah, 28 years. Yes, he's able to get a mortgage. He had his rights to vote restored. If you remember, felons were not allowed to vote. He had that restored. And they, when you get a pardon, they point out to you that this is a sign of forgiveness. It will restore your civil rights. It removes federal firearm disabilities, all those things. But kind of like a wrongful conviction, he went 28 years for like this with what I would say is a wrongful conviction. And where does he go to get that time back? You can't get it back, even though he's had his rights restored. Very hard to get it back. And we now have Peter working with the UGA Law School Veterans Clinic, and they are working to get what you would call reparations or monetary reparations for the 28 years that he suffered through this wrongfully. So they're working pro bono with Peter now as well.
Now, did he, and it calls to mind there, I guess my mother used to always tell me there are always people that are worse off than you are. There are people that are wrongfully convicted who actually have been in the penitentiary for 28 years. We've all heard those stories. Did he did he get a custodial sentence out of this, or was he just discharged?
He served 1 year in Fort Leavenworth prison for being gay, and then discharged with a dishonorable or less than honorable, I think they call it, discharge. And, that's it. So yeah.
Have you given up working on pardons, or are you continuing to work on pardons for people? Or
no, that's my one and only, kind of like my one and only murder trial, if you remember that.
Yeah.
I can say I did it. I'm not actively accepting pardon cases. It would have to be an incredible story like Peter's, an incredible outrage of injustice for me to take it like Peter's case was. So I think it may be one and done, as they say.
So you, Robin, incredibly skilled and successful advocate, have had great success with your cases over the years. Great monetary success and great success with other stuff. How does this case that you didn't get paid a penny for rank amongst those when you look back at your career, and what cases? There's always cases, I think, that stick in our mind.
It is, without question, it is the greatest thing I've ever done as a lawyer, period.
Wow.
It beats any verdict for my clients. It beats anything I've done through service to the bar. It is the greatest thing I've ever done. And and I'm very, very proud of it, obviously. And I don't know that anything else will ever compare, but it is the greatest moment of my career. And I'm very thankful to have had the chance to represent Peter in this.
Wow. Wow. What such a great story. And with that, we'll move on to actually hearing
Yeah.
from Peter, which is exciting in and of itself.
We hope you enjoy the interview.
Yes, very much so.
Peter, tell us a little bit about what it was like when you were in Fort Leavenworth prison. What was that experience like?
It was a big test of my mettle. I had done the military testing my mettle and trying to prove my mettle to myself growing up. I should have already been grown up, but as a 21, 22, 23-year-old, proving to myself really who I am, because growing up in the household I grew up in, I had a dad who was in many ways tyrannical to all of his children, not just myself. And none of us children ever felt like we had proven ourselves or known what we were all about. Were we worthy to do the jobs and the things that need to be done in the workplace and world, society, as people, and do it successfully? And I just knew at that age, you need to know who you are. And that was very important to me always. And in pursuit of a military career, which I certainly felt I was doing, I thought I was doing pretty darn good. I had a great first commander, Captain Claire M. Shea from Rhode Island, and she always told me that you need a big freebie, if you will, OER. Someone needs to write you a really good walk on water OER, and she did just that for my very first OER, because she said there would be people in my career later on that would not be so nice. And that just taught me the respect of the hierarchy and the people above the officer wise, as I was an officer.
What's an OER?
An officer evaluation rating.
Okay.
It's basically your ticket, your passport, and walking papers to your next position or promotion, and how well you either do or do not do in your career as a military officer.
And you enjoyed the Army.
I really did, and I didn't think that I necessarily truly enjoy it. I did, but on that note, I can say I did not still plan on being a career officer. At some point, I did plan on getting out, separating on my own choice. That's what happened. And going off and doing something that would be my passion should I discover it. Because I didn't go in the military knowing it was my passion. I was not one of these military thinking people. I met many of them. They were amazing. Their brains, their wit, their knowledge of the war machine. But I didn't have that, and I knew that.
You have shared with me while you were in the Fort Leavenworth prison that your brother died.
My the firstborn in our family, Richard Thomas Heidgerd, was in the Air Force, and he passed on of AIDS.
And tell us about, you were able to come to the funeral, but as I recall, you had to stay in jail while you visited for the funeral. Is that right?
Partially. Let me explain what detail needs to be up on that one. I was escorted to his funeral, and I will say this too. As an officer, I was accorded a level of respect that never did quite understand was accorded to me that wouldn't be accorded to a military member who was enlisted on that side of the house. I was not shackled, which would have been demeaning and humiliating. But according to the military and the way they do things, which a lot of times is like some of the backward states of the nation, how they conduct business and have their law books are in drastic need of updating. We won't mention which states, but they see fit to shackle enlisted folk. And that's just, to me, a travesty. People need to be shown the same level of respect, regardless of whether they're an officer or not. So that said, we'll end up that little tangent right there. But yeah, I was escorted to the funeral. And here's another little thing that bothered me too about all that was because I was already in prison. I'd been in prison since July of '89. And now here, this was October 2nd, or October 5th, a couple days after my brother passed. He passed the 2nd. The same day that Rock Hudson actually, ironically, had passed away in 85. They had me take my uniform back out of storage, mothballs, and put it on to be escorted to my funeral. Now, at this point, I had not been fully stripped of rank or pay. I was still getting a paycheck. The last paycheck was October of 89. So I was still an Army officer. Nothing had been written yet that I was not. So I was still getting pay and allowances. Yet the escort officer that I had, who was a captain, Eric Cipriano, from Fort Leavenworth, who was assigned there, who I had my questions about for different reasons, say at this point. Raised eyebrows, a very quizzical look do I have right this moment, escorted me, and saw fit to escort me out of the proper uniform. So here I was, and what does that mean? So before you ask me, what does that mean when you say that? It means a uniform that has been stripped of all its medals and ribbons and decorations. All it had was pinholes from where all these ribbons and medals and accoutrements had been placed. And I'm walking along with him through an airport, and enlisted folk are passing me right and left, knowing that we're inside, so they don't salute, but they would still have to greet with a proper military courtesy. Good afternoon, good morning, gentlemen, or sirs, or what have you. And as they would do that with Eric and myself, we were both captains, so I'll refer to him as Eric. Had he been a major, I wouldn't say Eric, but again, respect. They would look at him and say, good morning, sir, and they would look at me like, what's this? I had the black stripe going down my trousers, which couldn't have been removed because it was stitched in. So they knew I was an officer of some kind. So right at that point, I felt, again, this going back to this thing I mentioned while we were formally talking before the recorder had been turned on, a second or third rate human being.
That's how you felt, how it made you feel?
Yeah, already. So I did go, to answer your question again more fully, as needed. I did go to the funeral. As a matter of fact, at one point I went out the driveway, and Captain Cipriano, Eric, was in the house with my family. There was a bunch of extended family there. Of course, they were all visiting there for that reason at the funeral. And I was out in the driveway, and I had the keys to my Chevelle. And if I had been some nutcase, I would have considered speeding off in my car, trying to make it some kind of silly, stupid getaway. But I started it up and ran it for a little bit and turned the engine back off. I looked forward to one day driving my 67 Chevelle Malibu again once I was out of prison, and went back in the house. Conducted myself appropriately. And I did have to spend the night, though, and again, answering the question fully, too, in the imprisonment cell at downtown Lexington. I was not able to stay at the house for fear, again, be a flight risk or what have you. But that wasn't me. I wouldn't have been a flight risk. But
And then you were escorted back to Fort Leavenworth?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
This incident where you were court-martialed and convicted and served time in Fort Leavenworth happened almost 30 years ago. You've had a felony on your record all that time until just a week ago when we received the presidential pardon. How did having that felony affect you in all that time? Did it affect your ability to get a job? Did it affect how you felt about yourself?
Okay. That means I get the teary guy. When you started asking me that question, only one word I knew was the answer. It affected me horribly. All through life, I had always seen myself, as I told you earlier, while the recording, curious George type. That is to say, as a human being, I saw myself as a child who had become an adult. And I knew that I wasn't done being a kid yet. I just enjoyed life so much. But I saw life through childlike eyes as an adult. And I was happy to do it that way. Because in the Bible, there's a verse that says, approach the kingdom of heaven and God's word as a child. Because the kingdom of heaven applies and is for people such as these. So I had walking papers, if you will, using that word again, just recently used. To be able to do that, I had carte blanche to be able to approach life as a child. And with the excitement, again, as Curious George, I also looked at life as Curious George going through life. Much as a kid loves the book Curious George, I was still in that mode as an adult, thinking how cool it was to look at life and everything that happens in it as a kid. Very playful am I, and it bums me out many times as a degree that I've still been that way. I'm still that way now. That many people don't know how to take me. I'm very intense. I've had relatives that I've visited that I hadn't seen for years, and after coming back and visiting them out in Washington State, my dad said to me years later when I said I was going to go out and visit them again, he said, well, try to be less intense with Cousin Nancy and Cousin Harry. And what? What do you mean by too intense? He said, last time you visited them 4 years ago in '96. You just need to tone it down a bit. And I thought, wow, I'm still that kid. Yeah. So I hope I answered that question.
So now that you have the presidential pardon, which we know is pretty rare, hard to come by, but you have it. You've been pardoned by the President of the United States. How do you feel now?
Well, I feel that I've been given a pardon, but I don't feel, and I hate to bring this part into it. What part is that? It's the money part. Everybody knows in this world. Let me say this. Number one, Peter Heidgerd is not about money. I've never been about money. I don't have money. As long as God takes care of my needs as a human being, that's the important thing. And he has always been faithful to do that, as he's promised for all of us. None of us are promised to be rich or famous or poor and lowly. Some of us fall anywhere on that continuum, that range, that scale. And where I fall doesn't mean I'm not as good as the next one above me or below me. It means we're equal. And I'm happy to know that in my deepest parts. But that said, what the military did was disgusting. And let me tell you, there is more than meets the eye to this story. There are parts of this story, their very origination that I'm speaking of right now, came from, I believe, truly, I will say this only, from one major who I worked for, choosing not to mention his name right now. I conducted this conversation, by the way, having no idea you would interview me for this, in the mirror this morning, brushing my teeth. And that was this. He knows who he is. But it started as a hate crime from the very core depth of his, I'd like to say heart, but we'll use the B-O-W-E-L-L word, or B-O-W-E-L, or 2 L's or 1. It doesn't matter. But things of that don't come from hearts, or if they do, they come from a heart full of hatred. And he had a heart of hatred, and I didn't know it. I gave him his fare up. He did not give me my fare up. When I got assigned to him in Germany, I was going to be faithful to him as I would be faithful to any commander I worked for and had to report to and do the job for.
You believe this major targeted you as a hate crime?
Most 150,000% truly do I believe that.
Which is why they prosecuted you.
Most probably, yeah.
Okay.
And again, there's a whole story to that.
Yeah. What was your reaction when I called you to say the President of the United States had granted your pardon application?
Well, you and I know the history of that one. The pause and the shriek in the office at the nursery that I work at. It was one of well waited for and not hoped for truly deep down in me. thought would really occur that it would happen. The eventuality that I would be pardoned. It was a shock. I didn't think this was going to happen at all. You know, when you feel like you've been branded as a criminal in this world, you know how it's just the same as actors and actresses. When they fall from the grace that the pedestals that people put them on, because they have alcohol problems or sex things or addictions to, you know, promiscuity and what have you, people love to knock people off their thrones. They also like to watch them get up, though. It's like why people like, the pro wrestling and all that. The jobbers and the heels and all that. In a way, it's a sickening kind of commentary on how human beings conduct themselves when they're not doing so in an honorable manner. And God wants us to conduct ourselves always honorably. There's so many reasons why, which I don't have a TV, but I don't watch TV. Part of the kid in me again, too. My TV that I bought when I was in the military went on the blink in 1991. The switch wouldn't work, and from that point on, I still have a TV. Didn't have a TV. I didn't need to know at that point. I knew I didn't want to watch what was happening in the world. I was already knowing and sizing up what was happening in the world. It already happened some of that to me. Just lots of ugliness. And at that point in my life, I was becoming a gardener, and not knowing that I would be a green thumb and become passionate with gardening and all. I knew that I wanted to be out in the yard and enjoy the fruits of God's blessings in my life to the fullest.
You're working in a nursery right now, and you said that was because you found your passion in nature. How did you come about that?
There's always a story for everything. What is that? This one is. It all became when I bought a house on a leap of faith in 1991, not knowing how I would fare as a person who wanted to buy a house in this society that I was now branded as a felon, wanting to do, not knowing how, hey, I might say, I want to buy a house. They say, oh, sorry, you can't do that. You're a felon. Felons can't own homes. I didn't know that. I'm a curious George little kid in heart. I didn't know that's what the world was not made of. I kind of was starting to figure the world was made of things like that, but I wouldn't be allowed to buy a house. So I was renting that house with some other friends of mine from the military. And at the time, they had all moved out. And by that time, I knew that the lady who later on joined the church I'm a member of right now, and I hadn't seen her for years and years and years. And that was very interesting how that played out. But she offered the house to me, and I said, sure, I'd love to buy the house. I'd love to have my own house. Why shouldn't I, So I purchased the house, and when I did, to answer your question, I said, let's see, Peter, what do you want to do in this house where you're going to make your sweat equity? Where are you going to make your money? Where are you going to save some of the money and not lose it all to someone else that is a contractor who's going to do all the work for you and charge you for it, inside or out? And I said, I definitely didn't want to be inside the house doing drywall and all that. So I made my choice for outside. And when I did, within a year and a half, I was spouting off Latin words. My neighbor was getting a little irritated because he thought I was trying to prove and impress everybody that I knew, what an Andina domestica was or whatever. But it was because I was just starting to realize that I just really enjoyed this. And I wanted to learn the language of the thing that I was passionate about.
You've mentioned God and your faith and church in our talk. It's obvious that your faith means a lot to you and has played a big role in your life. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
I can. And there's one word there, just like the answer to that question was horribly. What has it done to me horribly was the answer. This one is that I've signed on the dotted line as a Christian years ago. I had doubts when I first did when I was 14 or so. So a few years later, I signed the dotted line again. And it has since become indelible that God makes the promise once, and we're the ones that have the doubts. And you know it in your heart. You have a level of joy that the world can never give you when you are on that dotted line and you sign to do God's will. Because what it means and what you know it means in your deepest parts is that when you have doubts, you think maybe I'm not a Christian, maybe I'm not saved. Okay, well, that's your problem. God doesn't have a problem. God makes it clear to you that you are mine. And how does he do so? he does so through the conduit of his Holy Spirit in your heart. And again, I'm going to get teary-eyed. He spoke to me, when I was in prison the first few hours, that same way, through my heart. He clearly said, Peter, I'm with you always. And so, I made it through that prison experience as a big test. Yeah, my mettle was being tested. A friend of mine right now, he's a co-worker at the nursery, the son of one of the women who is the most prominent figured women at the nursery, just got assigned to some jury duty. I was remarking yesterday to her about how proud I was and happy was for him that he would be assigned that, because it's a good thing to test your mettle, and it exposes you at a young age. He's only 20 or 21, of who you are and what you think you're going to be in life when you get things that you see in a courtroom that play out. So it was wonderful. So
When you received the word that your pardon had been granted, did you celebrate in any way?
I did outwardly to people, and I allowed people to show their happiness and excitement for me, because I don't know, I alluded to this earlier, but many times people look at me, and if I'm not happy, which is most of the time, I have a certain frown on my face that people pick up on, and it appears very negative. Sometimes people say, "You're a negative person, Peter." I don't ever see it. But I think the negativism that people pick up on, this is an aside, not to give further lost. The question is that I look at life knowing that this world is not the end all be all. It's the part, the realm we don't see, the spirit realm, God's realm, that is the real thing. And I don't lose sight of that. So because I don't, the way this world is headed now, which is not a pretty place, and where we are in the history of this world, it's not a pretty state or place, or the United States that was once very United States, one nation under God, indivisible. I don't lose faith of that, or sight of that. So that's why I think I might appear to be negative to some people. I just have a sense of the reality of what really is going on.
You mentioned that when some of your friends found out you had received the pardon, that they were very happy for you and shared that with you. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? How friends showed their happiness.
Yeah, certainly. I had people my neighbor, he was the first one, Kevin and Aaron. And Kevin knocked on my door the very next day, within 18 hours of the time that Miss Cook had printed the information in the newspaper, the AJC. And came up to my door and knocked, and at that point in the afternoon, I was like, "Who is this? I just gotten home from work. I just want to go out in my yard and drink a beer, And I opened the door thinking it might be one person, and it wasn't. And when it was him, he had a smile on his face. He said, "I read the article, and I just want to hug you." How does someone receive that information? Give me a hug then. If you want to give me a hug, here's your hug. And within another day or two, it happened again. An establishment in Hateville that sells growlers and beer and wine and all. And the owner and proprietor of that, he and his wife, he hugged. I came in the door of the beer girl, and Eric Lewis held his finger up to the person he was talking to at the moment, just stopped what he was doing, put it on hold, and came around, and I said, stop, Eric. I know what you're doing. I said, "You're going to hug me, aren't you?" And he sure enough did. And I got excited. I thought that was pretty cool. I wasn't expecting that. And then he and his wife, partner, if you will, Alexia, they both gave me a bottle of wine. And I just thought, this is nice. This is sweet. This people showing their love and respect and sharing a bit of the sorrow that this had to be something I had to go through. Those are wonderful moments. I appreciate it. And hopefully there'll be more of them. I haven't had yet, on the other side of the coin, anything of animosity or hatred, and I wondered that, and I do wonder, and I expect fully well, the world we live in, that people who find this out about me, because there are a lot of people I work with that have no clue about this part of my life. It's not a secret, but it's something that when the proper moment comes, that you talk about it, and when the proper moments don't come, you just don't talk about it. I work part-time for a very big company, and I work 3 or 4 hours a day for that company. And there are many people who are just as entitled to know the truth about me and find it in that due time as well, that I mentioned. That would be any one of theirs, because I work with these people and I love them all. We have great camaraderie. The organization is UPS. I love working for the company. It's just wonderful. So I would always hope the good side of that coin always happens. But if the bad side happens, then again, I hope that I have the right words from the heart, as God would prepare me to say to that individual or their people the right thing at the right time. Again, to allude only to God's love for them, and maybe in their hearts later on they would have a level of execution of compassion and understanding to forgive the way they felt to themselves, before themselves, the way they treated me, if they treat me in a manner of hatred or otherwise. I don't want that, and I hope that doesn't happen, but people are people. So,
Do you see, now that you've received the pardon, do you see a way for your experience to help others, that others can take a look at your story and gain something from it?
I would love for people to act upon that. I would love for that kind of thing to occur. Where does it occur? It occurs in the hearts of people. So I would love for that to occur for people in their hearts. And I hope that happens. But this world is so much of talk and no action. And I don't expect that it really will. I hate to say that. And that's not a negative side of me. It's just a very realistic way of looking at it. Any more than a Christian wants to have to beat somebody else in the head with the Bible to make them know the word of the Lord. But things as they are, just, I can only hope and pray for the best. And if I pray more about it, maybe more good will come.
So also, each time here on See You in Court that we record a podcast, Robin and I try to come up with some news article, recent news of some type that we talk to our listeners about, and also discuss maybe sometimes a little bit. And so, Robin, do you have a news item for us today that you'd like to share?
I do. And this is pretty hot off the presses from last week in Texas. And the headline is, "Oh, shoot, I'm still streaming," judge says after telling staffer, "We all know murder defendant is guilty." So this is a judge in Texas, Dallas County, Texas, and she's trying a murder case. And she, like some of our other judges, puts all of her trials on live stream, either YouTube or some other live stream. And she was live streaming this trial. And apparently the defendant, who's being tried for murder, starts to have what may have been a panic attack, started crying and acting out in the trial. So they stopped the trial. And
this was before or after the judge's comment?
This is before. This is what stops the trial. So they let the jury either, go home for the day or go back into their jury room. So nothing's going on. And after this panic attack, I don't think the judge really thought it was panic attack. She says, "Judge," and so this is all captured over live stream, because after they send the jury to the jury room, the judge or clerk forgets they're live streaming and doesn't turn it off. The judge is caught saying that she thinks he's crying for himself because he knows he's going to prison for a long time. And she's talking with a man in the courtroom who's unidentified on the audio. That man said, "Well, he committed murder for no reason." And the judge then said, quote, "He wanted to show her he's a man." And then she was also showing some frustration because the prosecution was kind of taking shortcuts and not really going through the foundation appropriately to lay a foundation to get some things into evidence. And she said, this is a quote on the live stream, "We all know he's going to get convicted and get a bunch of time, but that doesn't mean you can just phone it in. You got to follow the steps." The last words on live stream were from the judge, quote, "Oh, shoot, I'm still streaming." And so after that happened, she recuses herself from the rest of that trial. It doesn't say if she if the trial continued or they got a mistrial, but she's no longer the judge presiding over that trial.
I'm sure the Texas judicial discipline authorities are looking into that case as well. It's often interesting to me about that, Robin, as you've when they want to go after a judge for what they say, they had to think it before they said it. And, sometimes the saying of it is just the manifestation of what their attitude toward it was to begin with,
What they were really thinking, what they really
That's right. Yeah. It's talk about don't ask, don't tell, don't tell what your real opinion is, for the
and
judge.
I thought about you too, because I know you do a lot of you represent a lot of judges and get JQC hearings, which are all live streamed.
Mm-hmm.
There's always a hot mic in the courtroom when you're representing those judges. And I thought, well, maybe we ought to be a little more careful with that.
Yeah, it's definitely something to be concerned about. So mine today really sort of goes along a similar line, because mine is a Reuters News article. Harvey Weinstein will be retried in New York after rape conviction was overturned. And, Harvey Weinstein was the movie producer who really, but one of the things he's probably going to be remembered for more than anything is touching off the Me Too movement, because there were so many women that came forward with stories of sexual harassment after that. He was prosecuted in New York, and I think also had a case in California as well. The New York case was overturned by the appellate courts there. And the basic reason, if I could summarize it in about 10 seconds, was they felt like that there was evidence that was introduced which was prejudicial to him in the eyes of the jury, but which didn't really have a lot of probative value about whether he was actually guilty or not. And so it was interesting to me for a couple of reasons. One, the announcement that he was going to be retried came pretty quickly. And a lot of times those announcements don't come quickly. It depends on what the appellate courts have had to say about it. It depends on whether the witnesses that you need are still around and still willing to testify. But a lot of people have reactions to things like this, like, hey, I've seen Harvey Weinstein, I've heard what he did to all these women, and I can't believe that court reversed it. Even though the grounds that it was reversed on was just whether or not he got a fair trial, not whether or not he was actually guilty. And he would, could be tried again. And in fact, it looks like that he will be tried again. So I think it's sort of remarkable for a couple of reasons. One, that we know that our judicial system tries to sort things out and make rulings based on what the evidence is, and not over whether or not somebody's been tried in the press and found guilty there, pretty convincingly found guilty in my mind with Harvey Weinstein. And then, the second thing is, we talk a lot about trial by jury, and trial by jury is really one of the core missions of the Georgia Civil Justice Foundation, educating the public about that. And, if you're going to have trial by jury, you got to have a fair trial. And so no matter how reprehensible somebody may be or what they may have done, they're entitled to a fair trial, which is sort of the bookend, I think, on the story that you had, in which we did not collaborate on, today.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's the whole point of a trial. Be fair. Don't have your thumb on the scale of justice. Even if the guy's a crappy guy, it doesn't matter. He's entitled to a fair trial.
Yep.
And I think for the most part, our courts try to do that. They try to make sure, regardless of any publicity or press or notoriety of the defendant, they try to give that person a fair trial. And that's a hallmark of our judicial system.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a great episode today. I very much appreciate you sharing your experience as your co-host, Robin, about Peter Heidgerd. And I hope that our listeners will enjoy it. I know that they will. We also want to thank our sponsor, the Georgia Civil Justice Foundation. You can learn more about the Georgia Civil Justice Foundation at cuincourtpodcast.org. We also thank our producer, Philip Hoover, and we thank our listeners. You can learn more about me, if you're insane enough to do so, at Lester Tate at aikentate.com, and about Robin Fraser Clark at gatriallawyers.net. You may listen to all our episodes. In fact, we hope you do listen to all of our episodes of the podcast. You can find them at cuincourtpodcast.org. We hope you subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends and family. You can find See You in Court on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and anywhere you get your podcasts. If you want to send us any questions or make a suggestion about an interesting legal topic, email us at cuincourtpodcast@gmail.com. And that concludes our episode today. And until next time, Robin, we will
See you in court.
You've been listening to the See You in Court podcast, brought to you by the Georgia Civil Justice Foundation. Remember, justice is a shared journey, and your engagement makes all the difference. For further insight and resources, visit our website at www.cuincourtpodcast.org. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at See You in Court Podcast for additional content. And don't forget to engage with our community on facebook.com/See You in Court Podcast. Special thanks to our producer, Philip Hoover. I'm Fred Smith, Executive Director of the Georgia Civil Justice Foundation. You may learn more about the foundation at www.fairplay.org. Until next time, we'll see you in court.